Welcome to the Higher Life Institute. Just a few words about HLI before we go into today's program. About the HLI, really what is the objective is that it is founded for the purpose of exploring the application of universal brotherhood. It has been established and inspired by Theosophy, which says that there is no religion higher than truth. And on further study, one realizes the truth of universal brotherhood. And to further explore the possibilities of the realization of universal brotherhood in our day-to-day lives is quite challenging in this competitive world. And HLI, or the Higher Life Institute, hopes to help in that process, in helping society, in interacting with society through various activities like lectures, studies, book reviews, programs, or skits to help in understanding of how one can apply universal brotherhood and what are the difficulties in understanding it. Today's topic is quite an interesting one. It is a book review. The name of the book is Intelligent Evolution: How Alfred Russel Wallace's World of Life Challenged Darwinism. All of us have, or at least most of us have heard about Darwin and his theory of evolution, which is widely known and studied in modern education systems. And it is based on the principle of survival of the fittest. And if not all, at least some of us may have heard of Alfred Russel Wallace. And the general understanding that most of us have is that both Alfred Russel Wallace and Darwin lived around the same time, and both came up with the same theory of evolution, which is based on survival of the fittest. And it was just that Darwin published his theory earlier than Wallace, so Darwin's theory became popular, but essentially both were saying the same thing. That's what most of us know of Wallace. But the truth is far from it. Alfred Russel Wallace's theory and how it spoke of an intelligent evolution and how it was different from that of Darwin, something that our speaker today will be explaining us through a review of the book. A few words about the speaker. Mr. Sri M.L. Ramprakash is a founder member of Higher Life Institute and a lifelong devoted student of Theosophy. Now, before we start the program, we shall listen to the anthem of the Higher Life Institute. Please play the anthem.
मैत्रीं भजत अखिलहृदये मैत्रीं भजत अखिलहृदये आत्मवदेव परानपि पश्यत आत्मवदेव परानपि पश्यत युद्धं त्यजत स्पर्धां त्यजत त्यजत स्पर्धां त्यजत त्यजत परेष्वक्रममाक्रमणं त्यजत परेष्वक्रममाक्रमणं जननी पृथिवी कामरुहास्ते जननी पृथिवी देवः सकलदयालु दाम्यतदत्त दयध्वं जनताः दाम्यतदत्त दयध्वं जनताः श्रेयो भूयात् सकलजनानां श्रेयो भूयात् सकलजनानां श्रेयो भूयात् सकलजनानां श्रेयो भूयात् सकलजनानां श्रेयो भूयात् सकलजनानाम्.
Over to ML Ram Prakash. May start the review.
Thank you, Murali. Thank you, Venkat, for playing the anthem. I will begin with sharing the slides. Now, before I begin to review the book review the book of Michael Flannery on intelligent evolution, I would like to make two preliminary remarks. Am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are.
First is about the anthem. This anthem was composed by Sri Paramacharya of Kanchi, Sri Chandrasekharendra Saraswati. It was rendered in the United Nations General Assembly on 23rd October 1966 by Srimati Subbalakshmi and Dr. Radha Vishwanathan. The Higher Life Institute has adopted Maitri Bhajatam, composed by the sage, as it faithfully reflects the vision and the mission of the HLI, which is to consider and raise the problems and issues of the world to a higher plane, on the moral plane, and indicate the lasting solution to all the issues, all the problems, only with the understanding and realization of the fact of universal brotherhood. The benediction, I'll read the benediction. Cultivate friendship and humanity, which will conquer the hearts of everyone. Look upon others as similar to yourself. Renounce war. Forsake competition. Forego unrightful aggression and forceful acquisition. Mother Earth yields all that we require. The Supreme is most compassionate. So we shall be in peace with all, and whole nature will be in peace with us. This is the destiny of mankind. And Higher Life Institute is devoted to promoting this. And second point that I would like to make is, before I go to the second point, one more point is that this talk on Wallace's intelligent evolution, when you have heard this and also the second part of the lecture on 5th of March, at the end of it, you will realize that the keen observation and intuitive perception of Wallace on the universal intelligence as a guiding, organizing power of all life and evolution. How beautifully he has brought this out with his keen observation in the natural world. You will realize that the conclusion to which he arrives on the human situation, unlike Darwin's, which is very opposite of it. For the Darwin conception, man is no more than an animal. But in Wallacean conception, he has a higher destiny. He has come from and evolving into more than mere biological, more than as a mere biological creature. And the two different perspectives, one are Darwinian, leading to a materialistic outlook, and a Wallacean, leading to a very broad, generous, open-minded, reverential approach to life and unite science with metaphysics. So this is the anthem so well harmonizes with the vision of Wallace. It struck me when I had a reading of Wallace's, a review of the book on Wallace. Second point I would like to make is that when we planned this series of 2 talks, we never had an idea that February 23rd, or rather it is 24th of February, marks the 150th anniversary of Darwin's The Descent of Man. He published it in 1871, probably a year before he died or something. He had not published, he published his Origin of Species in 1859. And he didn't want to publish, he has already worked out the theory of descent of man, but he didn't publish it lest he should raise controversy, because he was up against the creationist, the church people. So he put it off till 1871, and published on 24th of February 1871. 150 years before, this is 150th of publication of Descent of Man. It so happens, you may call it accidentally, but when we hear Wallace, there is no accident at all in events of life. It so happens that our reviewing of Wallace coincides with 150th anniversary of the publication of Descent of Man by Wallace, by Darwin. Now, coming to the book we are reviewing, Alfred Russel Wallace's Intelligent Evolution. That is the name of the book. It was edited by Michael Flannery. Michael Flannery, a professor emeritus of University of Alabama at Birmingham. He's basically his main area of interest is history of science. And he has written a number of papers and very learned articles and publications on medical history and bioethics, and has won many awards. Now, he's in this review shows how Alfred Wallace World of Life. Wallace published the book World of Life. It challenged Darwinism. So the publishers are Erasmus Press, Nashville, Tennessee. It was first published in 2008 and then in 2011. Now, Flannery, we have already spoken about him. The foreword is written by William Dembski. He's basically a mathematician. A philosopher and a theologian. He's a fellow of the Discovery Institute. It was founded by Stephen Meyer in 1996. It is a think tank. It's situated in Seattle, in Washington, D.C., Washington. Now, contents of the books are: foreword is written by William Dembski, a philosopher, mathematician, and theologian, fellow of the Discovery Institute. And then there is an author's preface, Michael Flannery's preface, covering 72 pages. And in this, he contrasts the views of Darwin and Wallace in a historical perspective. Now, this is a very important thing, because to appreciate Wallace's counter theory to Darwin's Origin of Species, we have to have a historical background of the educational background and upbringing of these two people, especially of Darwin. So, and also of the philosophy of naturalism of modern science, and how Darwin was brought up in that school, which shaped his outlook. This is a very important thing that we have to bear in mind in order to appreciate the merits of the Wallacean theory and how it challenges, in the sense, it does not challenge Darwinism. He had a great respect for Darwin. He only points out that Darwin, in his Origin of Species, in his observations, erred in applying a strictly materialistic outlook, that is merely empirical knowledge on the mass of evidence that he gathered. And he gives his counter theory. And then the historical perspective is very important. And then editor's note is that he makes a selection. Wallace's World of Life contains a mass of evidence he has brought forward from his 12 years of voyage. And to read that would be, oh, it's gone off? Okay. To read Wallace's World of Life is very exhaustive, very exhausting also. So what the editor does is he selects relevant portions which is the very main points of Wallace's theory of intelligent evolution in his book World of Life, and presents them in 9 chapters in a concise and comprehensive way. Next slide, please. So he also attaches 3 appendices. In Appendix A, he reviews excerpts, review of excerpts on Wallace's World of Life. And then in the next Appendix B, the views of theologians and scientists on the work of Wallace. And in the 3rd appendix, he contrasts Wallace and Darwin on religion and humanity. And then finally, the index. Next. So contents of the book will continue. Now, under this, shall we go back to the previous one? Yeah, in the Appendix B, a scientist's view of the world of life, right? Come back to the next. Next slide. Yeah, one J.M. Mello, M.A., he presents a short compilation of the views of a cross-section of scientists on Wallace's The Mystery of Life and Mind, with special reference to World of Life. But we will not be reviewing that, reviewing of Mello's compilation because of short of time. I'm just mentioning it. Next slide. So Charles Darwin was born in 1809, as we all know, and it died in 1882. And he ventured on a expedition, a voyage in the HMS Beagle from 1831 to 1836. And his expedition took him to South Africa, South America, Africa, and so on. Alfred Wallace was younger. He was born in 8 January 1823, and he died in 1913. He had 2 expeditions, 1848 to 52. In these 4 years, he explored in Amazon basin, and in 54 to 62 in the Malay archipelago, which means in the present geographical region, it will be Malaysia and Indonesia. So Darwin had 5 years of exploration, whereas Wallace had 12 years of exploration. And Darwin did not live with or interacted with the indigenous people, whereas Wallace interacted with and in fact lived with the indigenous people in Amazon region. And there's a world of difference between the two perspectives. Wallace thought they were, he detested them, and Darwin thought they were barely above animals. But Wallace saw in them that they are very human, and all the potentiality of a civilized man is there in them. And he also noted there is no violence in their individual life except some sort of a violence in the ritualistic, in the ritualism, but they were peaceful people. So this just by the way of remark. And then let's go to the next slide. Now, just a brief view of the voyages that these two great men took. The green lines indicate the voyages that Darwin took. It took him to all these places. And then the black or violet lines indicate the voyages that Wallace undertook. So it cannot be expanded, but it gives us some basic idea of the extensive voyages these two scientists took and made their very important observations. So now, before we take up the review, it's very important that we understand the definitions and concepts of theory of evolution. But without it, I'm afraid we'll not be able to appreciate the basic difference between the two theories, the two different outlooks, opposite outlooks. Now, let's briefly deal with each one of them. Just to recapitulate, we have studied that in schools and colleges, but probably we have forgotten. The natural selection, we all know it is said to be a process of nature. It basically says that organisms are better adapted to environment, tend to survive, and produce more offsprings. And individuals in a population are naturally variable. Genetic variations take place, all in different ways. No two individuals in the same populations are alike. Some minor variations will be there. And then some individuals have traits better suited to their environment than others. And therefore, a competition for resource takes place. And in this competition, fittest survive. Now, the point to be noted is, I think there's much is made out of the fittest of the survival. It is not so much, Darwin, in fact, did not mean what his later enthusiastic followers have put their meaning on that and unnecessarily extended it to more than what he intended it to mean. So, the mechanism of evolution, according to theory of natural selection, is there is a mutation, genetic mutation, and then there's a gene flow, and in a sense, migration from one population to another, and the mixing up of the genes, and the genetic drift, they call it, in which random changes take place in a number of genes, a number of gene variant occur in a population. And these genetic variations because of mutations is a random process. That is the important crux of the theory of Darwin. And variants which are best adopted survive and reproduce. And invariably, there will be a differential reproduction. Those who are best adopted successfully reproduce and establish, and those who are not best adapted to their environment, they get eliminated. So the theory he advocated is environment cannot support unlimited population growth. Therefore, not all individuals reproduce to the fullest extent. So surviving variants reproduce and multiply. And to this, a gloss is put on fittest survive. Actually, the fittest is the most fit genotype, not the fit in the sense of physical struggle. And that's an important point to be borne in mind, but somehow this concept of survival of the fittest has been needlessly extended to more than what it is supposed to mean. It is the fittest of the genotype, and there is a sexual selection. We'll not go into details of that. So that is organisms' ability to obtain and mate successfully in order to produce the best bring out the best progeny. And there is unconscious selection and artificial selection in the sense that some plants out of their ecological domain get propagated into outside the ecological domain, especially in the human habitations. That is called unconscious selection. And then on that, the human artificial selection process takes place. So that's about the four basic principles are: there is a variation, and there is inheritance and selection over a time. And this mechanism called natural selection, it is a sort of a sorting process, but it is entirely random and mechanical and non-teleological. That we must understand. And then next, the principle of utility. In evolutionary biology, Darwin propounded the principle of utility. That means that natural selection acts solely through the preservation of the variations which are in some way advantageous and endure. Now, point of view of Wallace was there's a great difficulty in morphology between ape and man in their appearance and anatomy. But there is a tremendous gulf separating the ape and the man in their intellectual capacity. So, therefore, at some point, through some special intervention of some force or power, humans developed mental capacity. And he argues that natural selection that we talked of through genetic mutation and variation and so on can never account for the mental capacity and intellectual capacity and spiritual faculties of man. So he says, as far as human evolution is concerned, it outstrips the limitation of natural selection and principle of utility. In other words, principle of utility basically says that there is no organ, no sensation, no faculty ever arises in a species before it is needed by the species, or in a greater degree than it is needed. So there is a limitation. That is the principle of limitation. And then next point is positivism. Positivism is philosophy. We are mentioning this because the modern science still holds to positivism and methodological naturalism. And Wallace has many critical observations to make about this approach. Now, what does positive philosophy says? It is a philosophical system in which only that it says that only that which can be scientifically verified or capable of logical and mathematical proof is valid, and it rejects metaphysics and any god idea or theism. And especially is positivism applied to sociology, laws and their operative laws and their operation derives validity from the fact of having been enacted by authority and deriving logically from existing decisions rather than from moral considerations. So, according to positivist philosophy, religion, metaphysics are imperfect mode of knowledge. So positive knowledge is natural phenomena and their properties, relations as verified by empirical science, only that is valid. And we know that the founder of positive philosophy was Auguste Comte. So modern science, even today, adheres to this positivistic philosophical framework. So according to this, true knowledge comes from studying observable traits and actions rather than through reasoning and speculation. And coming to methodological naturalism, it is cognitive approach to understanding reality. It is a philosophy of knowledge. That is, everything that exists is natural. And therefore, there are no supernatural entities to appeal to. What is natural, what is observable, what can be experienced empirically is alone real and natural. So this is philosophy of naturalism or methodological naturalism or philosophy of materialism. Now, science can only appeal to natural entities and processes, that which can be observed and experimented with. Such ideas as creationism, supernatural theories are ruled out of scientific consideration as a priori incoherent. Now, coming to teleological synthesis. Now, teleology means explanation of phenomena in terms of purpose. They serve the purpose they serve rather than the cause from which they arise. It's the doctrine of design and purpose in material world. There is teleology. There is teleology deals with ends, goals, purposes, objectives, intentions, and consciousness. And natural selection is non-teleological. Darwin's natural selection, Darwin's theory of natural selection is non-teleological. A mechanical, natural process, a scientific model, and it has no purpose, it has no goal, it has no intention. That point may be noted. Now, all this purpose and goal is inconsistent with Darwinian model. So this is called methodological naturalism. And natural teleology in classical philosophies, of course, modern science doesn't accept it. So far, it is not accepted. according to this, natural entities have intrinsic purpose, irrespective of human views or opinions. Telos means ultimate purpose in Greece, aim, object, and so on. So, it is non-Darwinian account of evolution incorporates impersonal and natural teleological laws to explain phenomena of life, phenomena of vital force, phenomena of mind, of consciousness, rationality. So, according to Darwin, evolution is not an actor. It has no intention. So that is the basic difference between these two. And when Wallace propounded this theory of teleological synthesis, Darwin was he was shattered, it seems. Wallace published this review of teleological synthesis in a review which Darwin read, and in the margin, it seems he wrote a big no. And then Wallace worked this out with another colleague of his, Charles Lyell, a great geologist. And Darwin took up with Lyell how he could transcend the positivist framework of science. So this is just a background of the two differing worldviews. Now, the book review will be done in two parts. First part, which we are doing today. Second part will be taking up next week. The first part will be history of non-teleological philosophy of science in 19th century, which is the foundation of Darwinian theory of origin and evolution of species. And this will be discussed and contrasted with teleological counter theory of Wallace. And this, the author, the Michael Flannery, the author of the book we are reviewing, does in both preface and introduction. Of course, he does it in extensive introduction, and in the author's preface also, Michael Dembski, he make a review of it. So the second part will be taken up next week. That will be on March 5th, author's review of Wallace's The World of Life. Now, coming to the first part, we are basically comparing and contrasting views of Darwin and Wallace on the theory of origin and evolution of life from a purely historical perspective. And this, the author has discussed in his introduction, extensive introduction. So now this will give us a comprehensive view of the two theories of origin of evolution species. Darwin, evolution by natural selection, a blind, unintelligent, random process. The mutation that occur is random. And subsequent to mutation and their variations and their regrouping and gene flow is all this random process. Whereas Wallace says, everywhere there is consciousness, intelligence, intelligent organizing, directing. So this is the basic difference between the two. Now, the reviewer, the author, claims that Darwin fitted his theory of natural selection in the non-teleological mechanistic framework of mainstream science. This is a very important point because later on we'll see that it is not true the claim of Darwin that he came to non-teleological interpretation of the origin of species based on pure observation only, according to Epicurean methods. According to the author, Darwin only fitted his theory in conformity with his preconceived bias, preconceived notion of a mechanical model of natural selection. That's the argument of the reviewer. Whereas Wallace developed a comprehensive teleological counter theory, intelligent evolution. Now, though Wallace has been discounted during his time and also later because of his complete deviation from the mechanistic model or empirical model of modern science, and took liberty to extend the derivation of conclusions which are very reasonable and perfectly fits into the theory that he has propounded of intelligent evolution. For instance, human exceptionalism, which means that human can never have been an evolution by way of natural selection from animal world, or not even by a descent of man from a common ancestor of common ancestor of man and the ape. So what sets man apart from animal world and the ape, with which he bears some anatomical resemblances, is speech, and it demands intelligent evolution. And then he argues the author argues that later researchers in physiology and genetics, especially modern genetics, strengthens the argument of Wallace, and it can never be explained. For instance, the intricate genetical processes that the modern geneticists have unfolded, the mystery of genes and the DNA and the RNA. In fact, this can never be understood except in terms of the intelligent evolution, which we'll be seeing in the second part of the lecture. And then another important observation that the author makes is the ill effects of application of Darwinian theory to sociology. In fact, he goes on to say that the Malthusian demographic theory and the social engineering through eugenics and all these ideas flowed from the Darwinian theory of purposeless, random evolutionary process through natural selection. So now, what is the object of the author? This is a very important thing that we must bear in mind. Why is he doing this comparison? Provide a meaningful educational alternative to Darwin's non-teleological theory of origin of life and evolution of species. Now, we have studied this in our schools and colleges, but we never knew about the counter theory. And second object of the author was resurrect nearly forgotten Wallace. He's a significant figure in the development of teleological evolutionary biology. And this he does with a view to present a balanced view, a balanced understanding, to stimulate genuine critical thinking. So, author's introduction covers 67 pages, giving us the historical background of Darwin's early education and his materialistic bias. Now, Darwin was very greatly influenced in his formative years, which shaped his theory of evolution. He was a student. He was educated in University of Edinburgh. His father wanted him to study medicine. He declined to study medicine, hardly 23 years old. And then he was not interested to become a physician. And he came under the influence of Plinian society. Now, it's very interesting about the Plinian society. This society was devoted to starkly materialistic thought. It espoused the philosophy of materialism of Hume and Auguste Comte. We already discussed about it a short while ago. So, the Plinian society denied any spiritual power behind nature's throne. So, the origin and phenomena of life is solely due to physical and chemical laws. That is the basic proposition, the basic framework of the modern scientific modern scientific philosophy, which the Plinian society advocated. It was a club at University of Edinburgh. It was started in 1823, and Darwin first announced his first discovery of his first thesis in this in the Plinian society. And one observation should be made. Then one Dr. Robert Edmund Grant, he was a biologist. He was secretary of the Plinian Society in 1821, and Darwin was Darwin's mentor, and he was a tutor. So now, how the Plinian Society was strongly adhering to and discounted any deviation from the non-teleological theories of science. There are a number of examples. I think it will take time. I will not go into it. For instance, there's one theory was advanced that anatomical characters, anatomical chauvinism, to assume any difference between animal and human face, human facial anatomy is because of the human mind, properties and faculties of the human mind. As scientists proposed this, and it was outright rejected by the Plinian society. So he told the student, mind and consciousness were merely is merely the result of brain activity. So its principle was origin and evolution of life are solely due to physical and chemical forces obeying natural laws. So, and both were great companions, and Darwin was educated by him. So that point may be borne in mind. And then look at the agnostic mindset of Darwin, result of his earlier upbringing. Faith in God is a product of evolutionary hardwiring. It is not something natural, but it is natural in the sense that nature has built that faith in his brain. And he doubted Christianity. And he said the love of God is an effect of organizational influence. It is some sort of a brainwashing, in other words. And thought and desire are heritable structures of the brain. And they are secretions of the brain, mind you. So he was intellectually committed to positivism. So now, positive ideology of modern science, briefly. purpose of science is discovery of laws reflecting purely natural and secondary causes. So it is mechanistic and materialistic model of causality. There's no purpose, there's no intention, there's nothing of the sort. It is purely material. And matter itself has the potentiality to evolve. So Haeckel, Huxley, these were champions of theory of monism and self-actuating self-soul. Why he propounded self-soul is the basic unit of life is a cell. Cell is a living organism. He argued self is a living organism in the sense that cell is basically material which has the potentiality of emanating life from its own material being. So he called it a cell soul. So all metaphysical propositions are meaningless, and all teleological factors are beyond the scope of science. Methodological naturalism insists on empirical data and conclusions arrived at only from that. There can be no God or spirit behind natural laws. So what the author says is the academy closed its door against becoming a free market place of ideas. So any theory, any suggestion, any proposition made contrary to it was rejected outright. Now, positivistic ideology of modern science, continuing. So intellectually mandatory to support urbane cynicism about anything outside positivistic worldview. The reason why Wallace was completely sidelined because he espoused something other than positivist or non-teleological, something opposed to non-teleological theory. So religious skepticism and companion materialism deemed requisite virtues of honest science. If any theory propounded other than this was not science. And also X-Club of Thomas Henry, he popularized this Darwin theory. We'll not go into the X-Club. 9 scientists, Darwin, the Haeckel, Huxley, and 9 people founded this in order to strengthen the philosophy of philosophical naturalism and prevent any possibility of its being diluted. So now author's criticism of positivist bias. What author says is he puts on a scientific coating in his theories on radical skepticism and philosophical materialism. He goes on to show that Darwin claims he followed the scientific method, but it was not strictly scientific method at all. It was merely a scientific coating on his radical, skeptical, philosophical materialism. And he claims in his autobiography, Darwin claims in his autobiography, and author says it is not honest according to the author. He strictly followed Baconian method of empiric, that is observation, and then collection of data, and then analysis, categorization, and then drawing conclusions from it, inductive reasoning, and then forming hypothesis theories. Now, he claims that he strictly followed Baconian method and that he had no preconceived idea. Author says definitely not. He had preconceived ideas. He was totally committed to the positivistic framework of modern science. And then he founded no evidence or design or beneficent supernatural intent, and too much misery in the world to discount theological God idea. Darwin clearly expresses these opinions. His strong leaning to philosophical materialism. Now, where Darwin and Wallace concur, they agree that the changing environment has an effect on population and it produces heritable variations. And this affects the individual survival, causing differential death rates. We have already discussed that earlier. And species have a constant tendency to perpetuate new varieties. This results in adaptive progress of surviving species and branching into infinite divergences of new species. By species, it meant any group of genera, in genera, various groups which breed within that group is a species. So this results in adaptive progress of surviving species and branching infinite divergence of new species. So these varieties eventually convert into forming into new species. They agree on that. Where they differ is Darwin held that food supply was constant and population increased geometrically. But Wallace held the depletion, growth or depletion of populations due to availability of food and species' ability to exploit it. Darwin held to the theory of competition between individuals. Wallace said, no, it's not between individuals, competition between populations. So Darwin held competition leads to modification of a group. Wallace held that competition leads to change in population size across multiple groups. And Darwin stressed on individual struggle for existence, whereas here Wallace differed. He said evolution takes place in demographic context and population growth factor. So artificial, and this is a very important thing, Darwin always held that artificial selection in domestic breeding of plant and animal is a proof of natural selection and hereditary modification. Wallace discounts it. He doesn't agree at all because he says unconscious selection produced domestic races, right, true, but which have been modified by domestic breeding, it's true, but it does not illustrate the natural selection at all. There is a fundamental difference according to Darwin, according to Wallace. Now, Wallace says variation due to artificial breeding is not a proof of natural selection at all. When artificial breeding ceases, we have seen it ourselves, either in case of plants or animals, the animals or plants either become extinct or revert to original type. So Wallace says natural selection is essentially eliminative and not a building one. So nature does not so much select special varieties as exterminate unfavorable ones. That we will be seeing this in detail in the second part of the lecture. Very beautiful illustrations Wallace brings about. Now, Darwin did not explain how and when micro variations would produce macro speciation. And Wallace was very emphatic that blind natural selection is untenable and is a false assumption. So basically, Darwin's theory is variations in species and natural selection of the fit or adaptive variant is a random process. For Wallace, it is principle of utility and directing, organizing purposive intelligence as an efficient cause of progression through change. So the principle of utility and directing, organizing, purposive intelligence is the efficient cause of progression through change. So this is not merely natural selection by random accidental process, but by intelligent selective process. Now, a beautiful illustration of the two worldviews. Now, Darwin is standing on the beach. He sees writing on the sand, "Happy February 12th." He thinks scientifically. Some natural process wrote the greetings by chance or necessity. There's another, this is illustrated by William Dembski. Wallace standing on the beach. He sees writing on the sand, "Happy January 8th." He thinks logically, "Oh, one of my children or wife marked the greetings, though I did not see them come by and inscribe." So this gives, the non-teleological and teleological difference in the approach of science. Now, opposite perspective of Darwin and Wallace on causality. This is that the previous allegorical illustration was given by Dembski, but this one physiological allegory was given by Wallace himself in his one of his works. He postulates, look, just imagine there's a rate of intelligent beings visiting Earth, right? They perceive inanimate matter. They perceive plants, animals, inanimate matter, not inanimate matter only. They cannot see living matter or life. They can perceive only inanimate matter, like inorganic substances and so on. But they see everything matter in motion. Somehow they're moving by their own. They think, oh, matter is moving by its own inherent power. But what is it causes this motion? They are not interested. Oh, matter itself has the inherent capacity to motion. So, but they cannot see apparent cause of motion. And they see dead trees lying on the ground, and branches are lost and somehow they become converted into logs, and they begin to move about, and they move to a very curious machine. And in that curious machine, they are split up into various sizes and shapes. And they move again and get fitted in a great structure that contains, that structure contains material like bricks, iron, glass, mortar, and so on. And these branches are lost and become converted to logs, and they get fitted into the various places in the structure, like doors, windows, and so on. Now, scientific investigators also follow the source of each of this material, like bricks, iron, glass, mortar, and so on, and then trace them to their inorganic sources, and see how by their own inherent motion they get converted into glass and various other material, and take on various shapes and designs and so on. They all hypothesize, they all come from the earth. Blind forces originating in matter in motion transformed raw matter of the earth into various finished products. This is non-teleological theory. Now, if someone presents an alternative view, look at all the grand structures like mansions, bridges, factories, all the artifacts and beautiful structures and artistry. They are all positive evidence of intelligence, directive power of mind. The theory is propounded, teleological view. And then he's forthwith dubbed as unscientific, known forces will explain it all. So this is the very good illustration of the two different worldviews. Now, social implication of Darwin's stochastic theories. Wallace was very wary of social implication of Darwinian positivistic theories. His concern was prophetic, in fact. His idea of natural selection, motored by blind force of nature and survival of the fittest, shaped the materialism of modern science and modern socio-economic culture. This is the conclusion to which the author comes. Now, Francis Galton, who was, I think, nephew of Darwin, he extended the Darwinian theory of natural selection by random process and evolution of man from animal through this non-teleological way. So humans also, by artificial selection, could be improved. So eugenics, managing human reproduction to give advantage to the fit in the struggle for survival. The idea of racial improvement through breeding superior stock. Now, this is Darwin's socialization of natural selection. Now, the important point is how our thought process shapes our civilization and civilizational ideals and the consequences they produce. Now, what are the consequences of non-teleological worldview of modern science? It led to Nazi atrocities culminating in a Holocaust, horror of unbridled eugenics. So, on the contrary, you look at teleological synthesis and his social outlook, right? Wallace's intelligent evolutionary theory postulates a design and a purpose. And what is that purpose? He says mankind's intellectual, moral, aesthetic, and spiritual perfection. So so he was basically, because of this, the deeper, insightful philosophical outlook, he was a liberal. The reviewer calls him leftist liberalism, because Wallace held that the future evolution of man in the direction of his higher evolution, in the sense aesthetic and spiritual, depends upon the cultivation in that direction. So it requires a liberal society without impeding the free intellectual activity by imposing untenable theories, untenable ideas, and false theological dogmas, and so on. So he wanted clearing up of the environment, mental environment, and also socio-economic environment for living useful and happy life. So he believed in human progress through social reform and not through social engineering. So he argued for removal of all artificial constraints, theological or scientific or social or economic. He argued for enfranchisement and liberation of women from oppression. Women have to be free in choosing their partners. And he did not believe in inheritance of property and wealth for human happiness and progress. This is, he says, the acquisition of property and ownership is a fundamental cause of all misery and prevention of human progress along the right lines in the direction of aesthetic and moral and spiritual perfection. That was the outlook of Wallace. Now, Arthur concludes a remark. Wallace, completely ignored by Plinian society and the University of Edinburgh and all the scientific community even today, Wallace deserved considered him to be a merely Darwin's shadow. He wed teleology with modern evolutionary theory and made it more comprehensive and more reasonable and more purposeful. So he was the first one to restore science back to open and intricate interplay of nature and purpose. And this is very beautifully brought out in his The World of Life and many other books that he wrote. So his work exposes the dehumanizing influence of Darwin's positivist theory of mechanistic biological evolution. So Wallace's World of Life offers a fascinating synthesis of science and theology. And it is more pertinent today than at any other time. This is the author's concluding remarks. Actually, Wallace's growing stature today is a forerunner of modern ID movement. That is the intelligent design. But actually, intelligent design is not the same as intelligent evolution of Darwin. Intelligent design is just they argue that the basic types can only come from some intelligent design, but it is incomplete hypothesis. Whereas Wallace's intelligent evolution gives from which which inspired the theory of intelligent design. Wallace's intelligent evolution is more comprehensive and a grand synthesis of purpose, design, and biological evolution. So, in fact, some of the authors, some of the researchers arguing for the spiritual nature of human brain and so on, they're all outcome of the Wallace's influence. So this is the end of part 1. So we conclude here, and then in part 2, we'll be doing it in 5th of March. So we conclude here, and I think we have exceeded by nearly 20 minutes. So perhaps we can give about 5 to 10 minutes for any queries or comments from the audience.
Yes, Ram Prakash.
Yeah.
So you open up for any questions or any comments? I'll just read out the comments Siddharth made.
Mhm.
And one is he gives some resources about to read about Wallace.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other one is he said, note the mechanism of genetics and mutations were unknown in Darwin's time. What is being described here is usually called the modern synthesis of evolution from the first half of the 20th century.
That's right.
And then he says the principle of utility is an extreme but flawed interpretation of the modern synthesis. The work of Marxist ecologists Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Lowentin and Richard Levins in the late 20th century clearly demonstrated that the principle of utility does not follow from the theory of evolution.
Yeah, that's true.
And-
That's true. Okay.
So please comment on that. And
Yeah. But it is Darwin who propounded this principle of utility.
right.
Basically, it says that no faculty, no sense or attribute would ever arise in an organism unless it serves a utilitarian purpose. That was the theory of Darwin. And Wallace doesn't dispute it, but he says both natural selection and principle of utility have limitations, a very strict limitation within a certain context, but it cannot be extended to human exceptionalism and so on and so forth. But doctrine of utility is actually is applied in sociology and so on and so forth, but Darwin propounded it. You can look up the Google and see that Darwin propounded it.
Right. Okay.
And
the
one
next
more thing,
comment.
and one more thing about doctrine of utility that will be discussed in great detail in the second part of the lecture by illustrations. Wallace shows that how certain features and organs are developed for utilitarian purpose, and also for more than more than the immediate survival utility, for both survival utilitarian purpose, and also it served for more than the utilitarian purpose. He brings this out very well. That discussion will take place in the next week's presentation.
Yeah. And then lastly, he comments that I'm not convinced by the presented arguments on human exceptionalism, or that modern genetics indicates intelligent or teleological evolution. However, I do agree, and I've taught university students about the fallacy of Malthusian thought. Malthusian population arguments are bad science too.
Okay. Now, the comment is that the human exceptionalism is not acceptable. Many scientists today, biological scientists, they bypass this question. Max Muller, who has spent all his life in studying the ancient books and translated them into European tongues, says the farther back he goes into the history of human culture, the nobler specimens he finds. So this completely falsifies the theory of natural selection applicable to human. And second argument of Max Muller was that human speech and language, there is no way by which you can ever account for it as an evolutionary development from animal species through a process of natural selection. You have heard of natural selection, what a theory is, and principle of utility. There's no way by which you can prove this. In fact, Wallace goes on to argue that the various colors in nature and designs in nature have more than utilitarian survival value, and the appreciation of color, design, and rhythm, and so on in human consciousness is a part of the verity of human consciousness itself, it is not something that is derived from biological, evolutionary process. And the biological evolutionary process where you find all these grand designs and purposes, how they came into being is intelligent evolution. That is a separate thing, but they serve a purpose in stimulating the development of aesthetic and moral sense in human beings. That is Wallacean theory. I think if there are no other comments, we can wind up. And I will.
Just
Yeah.
final comments, anybody else? If none, then over to Prasanna for the closing thoughts and vote of thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Sri M.L. Ramprakash for an excellent synopsis of the introduction of the book. And this makes us more interested and curious to know more about Wallace, his life, as well as his theory. And the introduction itself took us so much time because there is so much of background necessary to understand complexities of Darwinian and Wallaceanian theories. So thank you for covering all these concepts and the prime ideas in a short span of hour and 10 minutes. And we look forward to know more about the theory of Wallace himself, and hopefully it will pique our interest, and we would like to read the book also, buy the book and read it and know it for ourselves. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to Dr. Murali Krishna and Venkatram Iyer for managing the meeting, for responding to comments, for sharing the screen, and for all the support. Finally, thanks to the audience. It is so precious, especially these days when there are so many online meetings from the last 10 to 12 months, and we're all pulled in various directions. But to spare your time for an hour and a half is very, very precious. So thank you very much for attending the talk and joining us tonight. The second part of the review will be held on 5th of March, 1 week from now, at 6 p.m. and it will be conducted on Zoom. I have put in the email ID and the website, and the invitation is there on the website also, or you can email us and we will add you to the mailing list. You can email us your questions and any comments that you may have or suggestions that you may have. They're all most welcome. So please note down the email ID and the website address. It's there in the chat box. So thank you very much and have a very nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.